Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So the old and the new powers are having a bit of a battle. Consider where Trump and Farage stand on this battlefield. Both Trump and Farage claim to be pro-fossil fuels, of course, very explicitly, anti-clean energy, but also pro-tech power. But you can't have both. The drive to launch the new technological revolution with AI will mean doubling, maybe even trebling our power generation in both America and Britain. There is no way to do that with fossil fuels. It can only be accomplished with a huge expansion of wind, solar, maybe nuclear. If you try to restrict clean energy expansion, you cannot have your data centres. Trump and Farage cannot support them both. They have to pick a side. Trump will have to choose before Farage, but that's fine because Farage will pick whatever Trump picks anyway. But how will this battle between fossil barons and tech bros play out for the rest of us? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So let's start with a few numbers because they're not just bad, they're drunk driving a super yacht through the Paris Agreement, basically. Oxfam's latest data paints a pretty bad picture. The top 1% of people, humans in the world, pump out more CO2 than the poorest two-thirds, like 5 billion people. I mean, you think about that, 5 billion bods, if you shrink that down even further to the notorious 0.1%, each ultramillionaire averages 83 tonnes of carbon a year. The global poverty line, new benchmark for basic survival, is considered to be 1 tonne. The average person in the UK is about 11 tonnes. So in terms of carbon footprint, one super rich lifestyle effectively equals 83 lives in, the poorest places like Bangladesh, for example, or 8 times the average life in Britain. And here's the thing. Those are 2023 figures. We don't have the full data for 2024 yet, but the preliminary data shows the gap is widening. And why? It's not just because they fly private, although, let's be real. A flight from New York to Cannes spits out 5 tonnes of CO2 per passenger, which is half the entire annual consumption of an average person in the UK. But the true engine of this disparity is how they make their money. We're talking about oil tycoons, tech giants, fashion conglomerates, right? These are some of the most carbon-intensive value chains on earth. And who owns the majority of these? The same 1,000 names that come up time and time again on like the Forbes list or the Times Rich list. When Exxon or Shell opens a new site, the emissions don't just get booked to some corporation. They get booked directly to the shareholders who profit. So, BlackRock, Vanguard, a couple of Saudi royals, handful of Silicon Valley VCs. That's the crowd, and their investments dictate the planet's fate. They profit while the rest of us literally pay the price. Now, let's picture the boardroom knife fight here that's defining this energy future. See, on one side, you've got the entrenched fossil overlords. You've got legacy oil families, coal barons, the politicians that they've put in their pockets to safeguard pipelines and permits. Then on the other, you've got your slick tech bros, constantly selling us on a future of technological miracles that will make our lives better and sustainable innovation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Both camps ultimately need the same thing. They need cheap, abundant energy, friendly, lax regulation, and a distracted public. The fossil lords lobby relentlessly to keep drilling, to extend the life of every oil field and coal mine. Meanwhile, the tech bros lobby just as hard to build huge 3,000-mile data centres that slurp electricity like steel mills did during the last technological epoch, powering our digital lives with an insatiable appetite. Yes, clean energy investment continues to grow, and that sounds great, but here's the thing. The dirty secret lurking beneath these glossy headlines is, if you take, for example, every solar panel shipped, China's grid, right, that powers much of that manufacturing, still runs mostly on coal. It is actually getting better, but it's still a majority of it is powered by coal. So even solar panels are not really, I always describe them as low carbon because the manufacturer produces emissions. And then close to home, Amazon's web service, this is the engine behind loads of websites and services, that's signing deals in Virginia to lock in cheap fracked gas to power them. But solar and wind energy is cheaper than coal or gas. So the tech bros would actually generally favour the cleaner energy, not because it's cleaner, because they're not clean, but because it's cheaper for their business. But the tech bros are not paragons of clean energy. They personally guzzle the juice themselves. They just want more clean energy because it's the only way to power their business. Of course, the oil barons don't want that. They want to keep selling fossil fuels, especially as the prices they can charge can suddenly increase without them having to pay any extra whenever some shit kicks off in a major fossil fuel producing nation. So there's a bit of a battle going on. Meanwhile, the house is literally on fire. You know, Canada's 2023 wildfire season emitted more CO2 in that year than the entire German economy. And then you think about insurers. They just announced new uninsurable zones in California as their problems worsen. You know, the true cost of this carbon party, it's externalised directly onto you through higher insurance premiums, soaring food prices, higher everything else. It's a bill we just cannot afford to keep paying. You know, you think food inflation is bad now on both sides of the Atlantic. It's set to get much worse as a direct result of climate change destroying suitable farmland around the world every single year. And here's where the climate story stops being some abstract environmental issue and starts bleeding directly into your rent, your job, your grocery bill. I mean, think about this. So, Jeff Bezos. So he decides to commission a lavish 400-foot super yacht, right? So the shipyard that has to build it pumps out thousands of tons of steel to do that, most of which is forged using coal. But here's the other thing. That same supply chain, those same skilled workers and manufacturing capacity are now prioritising that over building critical offshore wind turbine foundations, which they'd otherwise be able to build. You know, the result is installation queues for renewable energy stretching into the 2030s and beyond. Europe misses its crucial 2030 decarbonisation target. Carbon prices spike. Suddenly your utility bill doubles. It's not just about luxury. It's about misallocated resources and distorted priorities. Manufacturing resources would be better served building something for society than one excessively wealthy individual. Or take water, a resource becoming increasingly precious. I even did a James Bond film about it a while ago. The ultra-rich aren't just buying up land, they're buying up drought-impaired farmland in, say, Arizona or Colorado. Not to farm it, but to then sell the water rights back to desperate cities at a, 1,400% markup I've seen? Meanwhile, you know, you have Phoenix logging 31 straight days above 43 degrees Celsius, or 110 Fahrenheit for the locals. And 2024 study links 19,000 heat-related deaths in North America directly to these water arbitrage zones. You know, the pattern is really clear and devastating. You're privatising the shortages and socialising the damage. You know, they profit from scarcity and ordinary Americans then suffer the consequences. And it's not like we haven't seen this system of privatising profits and nationalising losses in Britain either. You know, who paid the price for the banking crash? Not the bankers. Rishi Sunak was literally one of the bankers who kicked it off. And I don't mean he was in that sort of role. I mean, no, there was a group of bankers who literally were described as having lit the blue touch paper on the banking crash. He was part of that group. And he went on to become the richest MP in British history. And then we even let him run our economy. The fact that Liz Truss was even worse didn't mean it wasn't a bad idea. And speaking of Truss, who suffered from her antics? People with pensions building up. Those pension pots are now permanently smaller, thanks to her. Some people have had to delay retirement, thanks to her. The investment bankers were fine, though. Don't worry about them. One of them lost his knighthood. That was pretty much it. Rishi Sunak's fine. Liz Truss is fine. Thanks for asking. So while this battle between tech bros and oil barons rages, with the rest of us not looking like we're going to gain whoever wins, what could we actually do to turn this into a win for society? Right, time to get creative. So whether it be in the US, the UK or anywhere else, what could we do? So first of all, a progressive wealth tax earmarked for decarbonisation. And as regular viewers will know, I'm not talking about the populist bullshit here, land tax. The wealth tax, which isn't a unicorn, the one that's actually real. The right wing keep talking about the costs of decarbonisation. Oh, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. What they never talk about is the much higher cost of not decarbonising. But if the right wing are so obsessed with the cost, well, let us put their minds at ease by showing them how we can pay for it without touching the incomes of hardworking Americans, Brits or anyone else. Land tax, mate. Second, strip fossil licenses. The International Energy Agency, which is hardly a radical Marxist organisation, stated unequivocally in 2021, No new oil and gas fields are compatible with the 1.5 degree climate target. Yeah, we keep licensing, Trump, drill, baby, drill. We're sort of moving away from new licenses in Britain, but we don't really have that much left anyway now. This is more one for the USA to take seriously. Third, public ownership of transmission grids. Now, why would that be important? Are you just trying to sneak nationalisation to everything, you little socialist? Well, from California to Germany, private utilities routinely stall new solar hookups. Why? Because it cannibalises their peak hour profits. It's a fundamental conflict of interest. But where grids are publicly run, like Uruguay, for example, renewables scale 3 times faster. Why? Because the profit motive is removed. Make the wires like commons. Give communities voting shares and watch how quickly coal plants get stranded, unable to compete with a truly integrated, publicly focused renewable network. It's about putting people and planet before profit in our foundational infrastructure. Now, to be fair, Labour in the UK have started nationalising our grid. They have actually done so for the part that makes these decisions, which is a much better move than people gave them credit for. But it has to be protected and expanded on. Align commercial interests with making the best decisions for society, and many conflicts of interest melt away. And none of this is bleeding heart wokery, it's survival maths. Every tonne of CO2 that you keep out of the sky saves roughly $220 in avoided storm damage, hospital bills, lost labour productivity, according to the American EPA's social cost estimate. They're probably getting sacked any day now. Multiply that by the 36 gigatons we emit each year, you're looking at a potential $8 trillion annual hole in the global economy. Averting even 10% of that would be the best return on investment in economic history. And finally, I guess one final action would be to break the link between big corporate donations and politics. Decarbonising is in the interests of every part of politics because it's a fundamental survival of the species thing. The only people saying otherwise either don't understand or they're the politicians taking donations from the fossil lobby, right? Break the money chain, you break the disinformation. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.